Is Guns N' Roses overrated? In the cesspool that is TikTok, I came across someone I follow that asked, what is one of those bands that is highly revered that you think is overrated? Now, that seems like a TikTok thing these days. They ask these stupid questions like that and they get all sorts of bullshit answers. Well, someone said Guns N' Roses. Their reasoning was that they have one good record and then a bunch of singles. Now, that tells me one thing. They don't know jack shit. Everyone has an opinion, but I find opinions are often based upon what people hear other people say, and they don't really have enough or know enough about the matter to validate their own opinion. So they just kind of go along with it. The ones that said this are young, and they probably haven't heard as much GNR to really make a good argument on the subject, and Guns N' Roses are just one of those names that they've heard a lot in their lives, but they've never really listened to much of their music. And if all they've heard were a few singles off the radio or anything off of Chinese Democracy, then I could probably see why they'd think that. But now, for the record, I'm not a Guns N' Roses fanboy. I don't even have a Guns N' Roses t-shirt or a poster. Never had one. I simply like and respect their work, so let's discuss. The one good album they're probably talking about? Appetite for Destruction. But I doubt they've ever even listened to it, because it's not a good album. It is one of the greatest rock albums of the 80s. During an era where rock bands released albums that had maybe 3 singles and the rest were all fillers, Appetite didn't have one bad song on it. Even the weakest song, which in my opinion is Anything Goes, is still a cool song. But every song, sure, the main singles were Welcome to the Jungle, Paradise City, Sweet Child of Mine, along with Night Train, It's So Easy, and Mr. Brownstone, which of course the first 3 being the most popular. But you can't ignore the rest of the songs like Rocket Queen, Out to Get Me, You're Crazy, and my personal favorites, My Michelle and Think About You. The entire album was amazing. A year later, GNR Lives was released, a double EP of sorts if you want to get technical. It has a couple of covers and a couple of originals from demos from before Appetite with live crowd sounds mixed into it to make it sound like live songs. The other half were originals, and one of those originals was just a new version of You're Crazy from Appetite. So it was kind of like Guns N' Roses' first Coda album. But it was still a good album. And as cool as a lot of those songs were, it didn't go without controversy. Honestly, Geffen Records took a huge chance releasing it, because between people thinking Axl Rose was talking about killing his girlfriend and burying her in his backyard and I Used to Love Her, to using the N-word in One in a Million, among one other controversial word these days that nobody really uses, but it was pretty popular back then. If you know, you know. Regardless, the album was enough to quench fans' appetite, no pun intended, while the band toured and wrote the Illusion albums. I guess now we're going to get into the singles that the person was talking about. Use Your Illusion 1 and 2 were dropped on the same day, September 17th, 1991. Not just a double album, but 2 monsters of double albums. Use Your Illusion 1 had 16 songs and Use Your Illusion 2 had 14. While both albums had some singles with heavy radio rotation on them and a couple of songs that were a bit different from Guns N' Roses' normal repertoire, neither album had a bad song and had some really heavy riffs as well. 2 of my favorite songs from Use Your Illusion 2, Estranged and 14 Years, both of which are very underrated songs in my opinion. I kind of said that weird. Anyway, do we even talk about the Spaghetti Incident? I mean, it was a cover album, but it was still fun. I guess after dropping 30 songs in one pop, you might have a bit of writer's block. I mean, we're definitely not talking about Chinese Democracy, because that was more like an Axl Rose ego solo album than it really was a Guns N' Roses album. So even if you base your opinion off of Appetite, Half of Lies, and the Use Your Illusion albums, how can anyone say Guns N' Roses is overrated? I mean, you can say that you don't care for them based on the songs you've heard, but this whole I think this band is overrated thing is stupid, especially if you're basing your opinion off of other people's opinion that have never really heard anything more than a few singles. Sure, Guns may have had a relatively short mainstream run for almost 10 years, but they sold over 100 million records worldwide, and their last reunion tour grossed over $500 million by the end of 2019, which makes them pretty friggin' far from being overrated. Furthermore, I think the term overrated, in general, is way overused, and it's often used to describe things that you're incapable of or can't have. For instance, being a rock star is overrated. Maybe. but I wouldn't mind being one. Or sex is overrated. Probably because you're not getting any, or the kind you're getting isn't very good. Like I said, music fans these days are sheep. They hear something someone says and they run with it and have very limited knowledge or experience based on their opinions. I mean, if you don't care for a band, I understand. I don't care for the Rolling Stones, but that doesn't mean they're overrated. A band's success and legacy will speak for itself, while your opinion really doesn't mean shit. I can guarantee you, anyone that says GNR are overrated, most of the bands they listen to won't even be remembered in 20 years. Well, Guns N' Roses will. Nobody will forget them, whether simply by name, reputation, or by the music they made. So, you tell me, do you think Guns N' Roses are overrated? And if so, please indulge us.